masterclass, and everyone in the room, obviously, and for whoever is watching online. So, who doesn't know me, I'm Anna, and I've been a producer and an engineer since 2014, and I'm also an Ableton Certified Trainer. I worked before for Native Instruments as a product specialist, and I'm also an educator. I'm a lecturer and a module leader in Point Blank, and I also create content, and I'm currently writing a book. So what are we going to be talking about today is what makes Ableton Live so unique. And when you're a user, and there's loads of stuff that I think even if someone's been using it or thinking about to use it, it's important to mention outside of the technical aspect as well. And so one of them is definitely the resources, which you get through their official website, and there's also lessons inside the DAW, because if someone's switching from Logic or FL or anywhere, it can look a bit intimidating at the beginning when you open it up, because it's got a quite unique workflow. So I think it's quite nice that we get little lessons and introductions. And then also on the website, there are loads of official tutorials, like bite-sized tutorials, in case if you forgot how something works, or you're unsure if you're doing it right. There's also other little lessons, like making music, which is kind of non-Ableton related. It's more like general, how a step sequencer works, how a synthesizer works itself. So it's not really about the company and the specific software. It's more like general little help to anyone who's making music. And there are also loads of artist tutorials as well, which I think is always really nice to see how other people interpret something that you do as well, which I think is just really inspiring. So I just, like, after looking around from all the other companies as well, I just feel like Ableton just providing a lot more in terms of resources than might be others, which I think is important for beginners and more seasoned producers as well. Another thing is community, because, and I think that's probably the most important one when you start your little musical journey, and you might be the only one from your friend circle because everybody else is into different stuff, so it can get a bit lonely at the beginning, I think, especially if you don't go to school. So it's nice that there are user groups, there's loads of webinars and loads of events hosted as well, where people can just generally get together and geek out. And another unique thing is the Ableton Push, which is kind of about 90% of the stuff that's available in the software can be used through this hardware. So it's like an instrument in a sense. And there is, again, just no other platform that's got such a high integration with a piece of equipment, which can just really, I think, enable more expression for making music, because not everybody is really into mouse clicks and screens, so sometimes it's just nice to get away from there. And then Ableton Link, there is, hello, got a little fly guest here. So that technology is being integrated into loads of other softwares as well, like stuff that you can get for iPad. It's in Machine as well, but the technology is coming from Ableton, which allows you to join to a shared session through the Wi-Fi, so everybody's on their own computer, but they all synced together, so you can play together your own little inputs into a bigger session. So this is really great for like jamming and also for performance as well. And then the other one is Max for Live. So that's something I think is truly unique. That allows you to, even like Max for Live devices that's already there, that you can get into the actual device and modify the patches and just customize different devices. You can also make your own too. There is this website, max4live.com. There's loads of free devices, which people made. So I think it's again just accessibility, because maybe you're looking at the auto filter and you have an idea, oh, I wish this could do that, but it's not doing it currently. And about 90% chances are that if you go to the Max for Live website, somebody made it, because also had this idea and knew about programming, so it's just there and you can just download it or learn a bit of coding and then make it for yourself. Which actually I think Music Hackspace runs loads of Max related courses. So if anybody's up for nerding out, then there are definitely resources. And then now let's get down to the practical aspects of what we're going to be looking at today. So the first is going to be nonlinear music production and how it works in Ableton, because it's kind of got a very specific relationship between the session view and the arrangement view. There are other DAWs that can do something similar, but not entirely the same thing. And then we're going to look at two of my favorite devices, which is also quite unique, both of them. And then we're going to look at device recs, which will get a bit nerdy as we dive into that, because that's something that can just open up a whole of possibilities of what you can use them for. And then maybe we will get to dummy clips and a bit of MPE, but let's see how fast we can power through all of this. So, session view, first thing that's seen when we open the software, which can be confusing if you never used it. And then there are, I think, loads of self-taught people who will use Ableton Live, but will go straight to the arrangement view, because that's something that is familiar, unlike this, that can look a bit alien at the beginning. But it's loads of fun, and it's very fast to generate ideas. So let's have a look at that. So what I've got here, we've got my trusty little push as well, but all I'm going to be doing, it could be done with any other MIDI controllers as well. So I've got some material here, which is some vocals, which sound like this.
You left and set me free. Our end was.
And then I've got some more sounds for later, steel vocals. And some of this. And I got some drums. So this is all I've got, and I will compose everything around it, like super fast. Let's see how fast we can get this done. So I've got a couple of instruments selected, but nothing sequenced. So I've got a little piano business. And I've got a nice bass. And another bass. And some hi-hats. So this is what we're going to use. So let's start with the piano. So what we're going to do, we're just going to launch the first scene. And navigate to the piano track. And then we're going to store all of the sequences that I'll be making into these little clip slots that we'll be able to switch between and eventually lay down an arrangement from it. What this should be focused on is the speed of how we can come up with something. We're not going to compose a whole track in here. This is not what it's all about, because obviously all genres need lots of different techniques to pull an arrangement, little micro edits, transition sounds, automation, whatever. So that's not going to be done here. It's just the main body of the idea. So let's do some piano.
You left and set me free.
Maybe a little bit of metronome wouldn't hurt.
You left and set me free. Our end was beginning of me loving you.
Okay, so that's down. Let me put on fixed length. Cool. Okay, so we got these chords here. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to quickly duplicate this so I can add some more notes to it. So once that's done, then we will end up with one clip and two clips. And they are exactly the same. But now I'm going to use the second one to add the different layer to it.
You left and set me free. Our end was beginning of me. Loving you was breaking me, cutting deep.
Okay, so that's done as well. Now let's go get a bit of bass in.
You left and set me free. Our end was beginning of me. Loving you was
Let's quantize.
me, cutting deep with your words in my soul.
Okay, bass one is in. Let's get the second bass in.
You left and set me free. Our end was beginning of me.
That's done too. And now some hi-hats. So how this is going to get done, I will want some repeated notes like this, but I don't want to be hitting this like a mad woman. So I will just put note repeat on, and now it does this. I'm going to change this to 8 notes, and then let's get this in.
You left and set me free. Our end was
Duplicate.
beginning of me. Loving you was breaking me, cutting deep with your words in my soul.
Okay, so we got that down. Now we're going to go in and just quickly arrange these clips into some sort of body that we can record into an arrangement. So we're going to use scenes for that. So this row here, that's a scene. I already named this intro. So whatever is in that first row will be played together. So I'm going to remove the vocals from there and then put this little like filling sound there. So if I trigger that scene, then what we hear will become the intro. And if I change the scene,
You left and set me free. Our end was
so that's obviously quite a big change. So we will organize this into a little more evolving structure. So the intro is kind of good how it is, and then the second lane be the piano, but the first version. So that goes down there as well, and no bass yet, no second bass yet, and the hats will come in way later. So we will select those, move them down. Okay. Can go down there too, and then the piano. There, and then bass. I'm trying to do this as fast as possible because I kind of have the plan. Just need to make this happen. Okay, there, and that's good. Chops. And then the drums. Okay, let's see. So I'm going to stop all the clips, and now we're going to move everything into here, to the overview. So I'm going to trigger the arrangement record button, and we'll jam these clips out quickly into an arrangement that we just created.
You left and they set me free. Our end was beginning of me. Knowing you was breaking me. Cutting deep with your words in my soul.
Okay, so that's what we got so far. And that's pretty much what I wanted, because we got something that kind of is starting to form some kind of like, I don't know, like a skeleton of an arrangement. And then this is like a good enough starting point to look and realize, okay, that's the section where I could bring in another instrument, I could make a drum edit there, I could add some automation, maybe I could switch the vocals up there. But what this other view allowed us is just to quickly lay down the ideas while we're just looping and not really worrying about going from this is the intro, that's the chorus, that's this, like really worrying about like moving the clips around and already building arrangement. So this is, I think, is truly one of the unique features that Live will give you. And basically this view is the whole reason of why the software is called Live, because back when this was first released, that's all you had. It was a loop arranger, a loop sequencer. It wasn't about arrangement view. There wasn't even MIDI at the beginning. It was just there for people to just chuck in audio files and quickly perform with them and just jam with them. And then later all the stuff came about as people had requests and they become really popular. So the next thing we're gonna look at is now gonna be devices. So I'm just gonna leave this as it is, and then maybe I can go home and crack on with this arrangement. And first we're gonna look at hybrid reverb. So I've got this kalimba here. I recorded this yesterday. It sounds terrible, but that's basically the point, because it will start sounding good eventually. So it sounds like this. Unfortunately, I don't have a triangle, so you know, this become my instrument. So obviously it's really dry and there's loads of resonance and whatnot, but that could be EQ'd. But it's just the fact that there are some devices in Live that can even make something sound nice that might not sound nice at the beginning, which I think this is a good example for that. Okay, so I'm gonna just put hybrid reverb on. And I'm gonna change my zooming settings because we're gonna start fiddling a lot at the bottom of the screen. Like that. There we go. So what's special about this device is that it's not one reverb, it's two reverbs in at the same time. So one bit is a convolution reverb, which is a realistic reverb. Impulse responses were recorded. We could record the impulse response of this room, and then you could take it home, put it into this device, and then you can make your music sound like how it would sound in this room. And then there is another bit, the second part is, which is the algorithmical reverb, which you can find anywhere. All companies, all third-party companies, all those, everything has that. That's being created mathematically, not through like real, through the real thing, through the real space. So they can be connecting in serial, so one goes into another, which means the convolution will go into the algorithmical now. It can go in parallel, so the signal gets split, or it can be either one or the other. So there's loads of presets, loads of real places. There's even an impulse response of the Ableton canteen, if you ever wanted to put something to sound there, and different studios. But what I'm more excited about is the texture presets, like the texture group, because there is some like really weird stuff. So let's have a look at some of them. So let's have a look at the bubble first. So again, without it. Now I'm going to put this on. And then we're going to spice this up on the algorithmic part. We put this shimmer on, which can also be tuned. Let's pitch it down. There we go. And then we can do, let's check our chains. Clouds. Marbles. Because they're not really realistic, and I think they are really good for sound design. I wouldn't specifically put any of this on vocals or piano or anything that I would like to make sound natural, but definitely to something like this kalimba that I would not want to keep one bit of the original sound characteristics. I think it's really nice to really spice it up. There's also this freeze function in it, where we can kind of create a feedback loop of the reverb and feed it back into the input. So that's something that can be nice and resampled, and then you can create like these drone sounds. Let's see if we can make this work. I don't really want to blow up the speakers. So let's freeze it. And start feeding it in. There we go. I did make this work actually, that I recorded this and it ended up in somewhere sidechained as an instrument, so it can come up with some really good stuff. There's also an EQ in it, so it can just roll off all the lows. And you can also add some vintage saturation. Let's put a lot. And yeah, that's that. It's definitely one of my faves. Also, we can just chuck anything we want in there. So you can go on the internet. I don't know, you might always wanted to hear your vocals, what it would sound like in, I don't know, a church in Barcelona. You go up on the internet, find the impulse response for the church in Barcelona. And then what you do, you just put the impulse response in there, drag and drop, that's it. What I'm going to do though, I'm going to put my vocals into the reverb and use it as an impulse response, and then see what it sounds like. So this is what I put in there. So we're going to use this as a reverb. See what's up. some horror sound design with this in no time. So there you go. It obviously, if you use it in a more traditional way for vocals and stuff, it sounds absolutely lush with the more traditional presets, but today is not about traditions. So next up, another something super exciting, which is Spectral resonator. That's also arrived with Live 11. So we're gonna have a look at that on vocals and on drums as well. It's really similar to how a vocoder sounds, but not really. So let's just put it on the vocals, the normal vocals. Put it on. There are different modes. There you go, can turn me into R2D2. Okay, so what this does is basically puts the signal and creates these partials. So that's what we see on the screen there. And it's working with resonance frequencies. It's even like over kind of saturating the resonances, and that's what we hear musical. So we can, I'm not going to explain the whole device here, but I'm going to show you the exciting bit, because this can be MIDI sidechained as well. So we can kind of manipulate the resonances with pitch information that will come from MIDI. So currently it's in internal mode, so we're going to put it into MIDI, and I'm going to feed the piano sound to it. So remember the piano that I've recorded at the beginning? So we're going to feed this into the vocals through this device. So I already routed it, so it's getting MIDI from the piano track. So we got a melody, but it's currently monophonic, so we're just getting a little melody. But if I switch this to poly, and it's receiving 8 voices, we can receive 8 voices at the same time. So now we're actually going to start hearing the chords. So we can transpose this. So there you go. I think this is really fun. I use this a lot, especially on drums, because obviously we can automate loads of these parameters. So it can be really nice for like transitioning from one section to another, that suddenly the drums before the next section just starts kind of talking through the chords. It can be really confusing, but I think that's what makes sometimes an arrangement interesting, and it kind of can be a cheap trick. So let's put this onto the drums now. So I'm just going to literally move the device there. So I'm going to bypass this. Oops, we already got one there. So original drums. Put it on. you go. So that's something I would automate, probably the decay. So it goes from this more staccato, short sounds to the more kind of epic, evolving long sounds. Yeah, so these are the two devices I definitely wanted to cover. So now we're going to look at a little bit of MPE, which also came with Live 11. It is available in other DAWs as well, but it's the accessibility and how you can use it straight away is something that I find unique in Live. So MPE, MIDI polyphonic expression. You must have guys seen some devices around, like hardware, like the Rolly C board, for example. So that's an MPE instrument because you can slide and it's sensitive for that and also for pressure. The good news is if you own a push, it's kind of half MPE because if we go to the setup and we put on the pressure poly, then it will be sensitive to pressure. So we can apply MPE settings just by pressing the pads more. There's obviously we can't slide on the pads, so we can't really do that. But also you can use MPE in Live if you don't have any controllers because we can just draw it in like we would with automation. So what is it useful for? And what does it do? And what can you use with this? So I've got this instrument here and sounds like this. So wavetable in Live is MPE capable. So we got this MPE little button here now. And if I press on there, then we get all these numbers and these values and whatnot. So what we're going to work with is the slide and the pressure. So the slide is currently assigned, because I assigned it already, to the oscillator 2's pitch, and the pressure, which I can do through the push, is assigned to the filter frequency cutoff, well, the frequency itself. So what's going to happen is basically as I lean more on the pad, the filter will open up more on the sound on note basis, and then I will draw in the pitch. So, you know, you might already be thinking, but hang on, we can do that through envelopes, which is fine. We could just get the pitch bend or the transposition on in the clip views envelope settings, but then what is that going to cause? If we have a chord progression and we put in the transposition, the whole chord progression will have the transposition, every single, like if we have a C minor triad, then every single note of it will follow the transposition or the pitch bend. But what if I only want the top note? What if I only want the root note to have transposition and I want to leave the two other notes alone? That's impossible to do without MPE because that's something we need the expression for, the expression controls. So I'm just going to record in quickly some chords and then we will see how this is being displayed and what this does. Okay, so if I open up the clip view, then this is what we're going to see. These little, it's like my heart rate right now, just up and down. So that is the pressure control. So you see if I select one note here, then that will highlight with blue the expression, the pressure for that I applied. So I was leaning in like that. And we could hear that the filter was moving as I was pressing more on the pad. So yeah, this is something we can draw in as well by hand. So let's do that for the slide because I don't have anything to slide on. So I'm going to select one note. So I'm going to do this to the top note. So once the note is selected, then I can draw this in like automation. So let's slide this up, maybe 24. And then take here that note, and we're going to slide that down from 68. I think we could definitely hear that. Like that. All right, let's see. So we could make this, basically drive this mental, and we could do like, okay, take the first top note and pitch it down, and then take the middle note and pitch that up. So we're going to have like the cross like that. It's probably going to sound like a cow, but it will definitely get the point across. There we go, what a chaos, but you see you can get control over each one of the notes and pitch them up and down independently, or have the filter opening up on certain pitches itself. It's impossible to do it any other way, because if you didn't use MP for that, then you would basically have to have 3 tracks, having each note in each track, so 3 times the instrument, and yeah, it would be just unmanageable. So there we go, even if we don't have a controller, we can still do this just by drawing stuff in. And to make it even more interesting, there is another device which kind of controls this movement of the pressure or the pitch, which is called MP Control. It's a Max for Live device, and it looks like this. So we can choose from pressure, slide, and pitch. So we have the pressure assigned to the filter cutoff and the slide to the pitch. So let's do, therefore, the slide first. So this basically controls the bend of how this happens when the pitch starts to go up. Is it going to go up like this, or is it going to go like this or like this? You know, like, think about it like some kind of extra modulation in a sense, but you're basically bending the pressure or the slide and whatever is actually assigned to. So this can sound fairly funny, shapes like this. Got stuff like this. There you go. And then we can change if we want to the pressure and then do the same thing. That's pretty nice actually. Yeah, anyway, I think this is like really nice for like creating interesting, like quite epic sounds, like intros and stuff like that. And yeah, because I think if someone doesn't know about MPE, it's just something that would be just really bothering to hear that, oh, how are the notes going to different directions? So yeah, I think it's just really cool and very accessible in live. That's the point, even if you don't have any controllers, so you just go and draw and then bend and then you're done. And now we're going to go to device racks, because now that is something that's truly unique to live. Can't find it anywhere else. But we're going to go get really nerdy by the end, because there's loads of ways how we can use device racks. So we're going to create some from scratch quickly. So I'll rather show you, and I'll explain on the way. So we need a MIDI track, and then there's two ways how we can get access to device racks, that we either find an empty rack or we group into a rack. So I'll show you both. So first we're going to go to instruments and then find an empty instrument rack and then put that down. And it kind of already asking to drop an instrument or sample here. So we will do as we said, as we told. So I'm going to put there 3 instruments. We're going to just first create something simple, a layered instrument. Yeah, nothing nerdy, something really, really simple. So I need this 5th glass sound. So now there's nothing new, operator downstairs, you know, nothing really interesting. But if I open up the chain selector, so that's where we can have different chains within the same track. So if you think about it, when you have one track and you start putting, you put a sampler, you put a reverb, you put a chorus, whatever, that's one chain of devices, right? And that's what you can have. That's how things usually work. But in a rack, you can have multiple chains on the same track. So we can have 3 instruments if we want, and all 3 instruments can have 3 different chains of processing on them. So this is going to be simple. We're just building something that is doable without racks, but you would use 3 different tracks. So when you sequence, you would have to sequence 3 times the same notes in order to layer. But if you use racks, then you can just sequence once, and then all the 3 instruments will be triggered. So first instrument is in there. Second will be this guy here. So now it's 2 of them. So 1, we can solo it, and 2, and the 2 together. So let's bring in a third one, which sounds like this on its own. So now the 3 of them. Apart as well. So I'm going to put the 2 lighter sounds, one to the right, one to the left. We got volume for each of them as well, in case one is sticking out too much, so they can be mixed together. So there we go. We just created a layered instrument, and now all we need to do is just sequence this one track, and all these 3 instruments will be there sequenced. So even if you're using loads of presets, this way you can still kind of come up with sounds that nobody else wouldn't have, because they wouldn't stock them together. Also, to take this a little further away, because I mentioned that we can add effects as well to each chains. So what we could do is maybe add the filter and an LFO, but just to one of the layers. So the 3 chains are there. So all I need is get auto filter, and I'm going to get LFO as well. So I drop that onto the chain that I wanted, and they are down there. So that's only going to affect this string sound. So LFO, whoever knows me knows that's one of my favorite devices, because it's simple, but it does a lot. So we're going to assign this wobble here to any parameter on any other devices that we want to. So that's going to go to the frequency cutoff now. So we're going to go map and then touched the frequency, and now it started to drive it. It's probably going to be too much movement. Like that's a lot. So what we're going to do a minimum and maximum value. So now it doesn't go all the way down there. That's better. And we're going to also sync this to beat division. So it's going to happen over 1 bar, the wobbles. Can maybe add a bit of jitter. And now together. So this just kind of becomes endless because also this third chain is actually a device rack on its own. So there is a rack inside a rack right now. Yeah, we'll get to that. But the first rack is done. We just built this kind of cinematic sound out of 3 different instruments with a bit of modulation. So let's build another one where we're going to kind of design something more for performance. So, new MIDI track, and this time we're going to start with an instrument and then group that into a rack itself. So what I need my trusty Reese. And I'm going to right click and choose group. And now that device got grouped into an instrument rack straight away. So 1 bass, and we're going to get a JX on the top. So now it's the 2 of them. But it's quite unlikely you would like layer a bass with a pad sound because of the frequency ranges you would be playing. Can't really mix it properly either. So we got a kind of different idea here. So what I'm planning to do is start using these buttons here. And the first we're going to look at is the keychain selector. So what we see here is the semitones of a piano. So let's imagine that we have a really big piano in front of us and we want to perform. We're preparing for a set. And we want to start playing after the bass, the pad really fast, and we might don't have time to record and able to arm the next track. So instead, we're going to use the same track to play the 2 instruments. So the low notes will be playing the bass and the higher notes will be playing the pad. So I'm going to make that bass to play up until C2. And everything above C2, oh, the other way around. So the pad will play everything above C2, and the bass will be triggered by notes below C2. So even on the push, now I can, no, I lost my fancy screen split. I'll get it back. There we go. Just gonna leave the push on that side. Okay, so low notes, it's just the bass, but on the top, that's the pad. So I can play them together. So all of these are the bass, all of that is the pad. So they don't have to be triggered the same because anyway, I wouldn't trigger a bass line with chords. But then if I don't do chords, then I will have to sacrifice the pad. So this way we could have more instruments as well. We could say, you know, the bottom 2 rows gonna do bass, the notes about their a lead sound, the notes about their a pad sound, whatever. So I don't think we have enough hands for that, but theoretically we could have loads of instruments split across a keyboard. So this is more for performance, because in production you'd probably want to have 2 different clips and tracks for the 2 instruments, but this is golden for designing something to perform with without having any external plugins like Contact or something coming into play. So that's another use for Rex. And then the other one will be more for mixing, which is split band processing. So if I get another MIDI track, we're going to work with a big fat Reese again. Where's my simple bass? There we go. So there'll be one bass there. Again, quickly group this into an instrument track too. And this time we're going to duplicate the same device twice. So we're going to have the top one. So if I play this together, it's going to be really loud because it's the same instrument twice. Yeah, obviously, really loud. So what we're going to do, we're going to separate them. So the top chain will be Why are you doing this to me? I don't need the push for now. Okay, so the top chain will be the mids, and then the bottom chain will be the sub. So we're going to solo the sub first, and we can actually go into the synth itself and modify it a bit, because this is not a sub, obviously. So first thing first, we're going to roll off the top with the filter cutoff. And we're going to change the 2 shapes of the 2 oscillators. So 1, 2. So that's more subby. So that's the bottom layer, and then the top layer remains the same. So now we're going to get an EQ, well, 2 of them, and put them on to the 2 chains. So that's on the first chain, which is the mids. So we're going to EQ out all the lows. And then for the bottom one, which is the sub, we're going to do the opposite movement. And now the 2 of them together. Which is great, because I got control over the 2 layers, so maybe I can saturate one more than the other. I think I'm probably going to leave the sub alone, but we can go nuts on the mid bit and maybe put on, again, some modulation with the LFO as well. And we can put on some saturation, some noise, and my best friend OTT, bit of multiband compression. Okay, so let's go step by step. So this is going to be only applied to the top bit, and that's the beauty of it, because the sub will stay unbothered. That's what we want. We want it in the middle, simple subbing away. We don't want to modulate it and do anything to it. So it can do its job. So let's map this again to the frequency cutoff. Set this up. Cool. Now let's put on some saturation, maybe a bit of wave shaping. And then a bit of noise. And then OTT. So that's the top. Now we can bring in the sub. There we go. So 2 different chains on the same track, different processing, different bands. Again, racks, device racks will be the best friends for this kind of mixing techniques. And then we're going to work on the vocals now a bit as well and have a look at some macro snapshots, because that's also really, really unique to live. So if I find the vocals, and I already got an effect right there, obviously, so it doesn't sound dry. So we're going to take that off. And it's going to be extreme, the effects I'm going to apply, so you guys can also hear it in the room on the speakers. But the plan would be, again, it will be built for performance. Yeah, so we go production, performance, production, performance. So it's another one for performance. So I'm going to get down an auto filter. Let's say the scenario that we're going to play here, that we're preparing an effect rack to perform a 3-track set. Yeah, so we're going to pretend that these lead vocals, I'm singing it live right now, and I'll be singing over 3 different, very different tracks. So obviously, sometimes it's not really feasible when there is not much technical knowledge, for example, or there is more involvement from the front of house engineer. But in reality, when the track is really electronic, we would want different processing on our voice over the different tracks. But loads of the time, it kind of doesn't happen. There's just a reverb, whatever, and there is just singing over each of the tracks. But we can change that in live, because we can. So one track will have this kind of telephony effect on the voice, because that's how the track goes. And then the other one will have a really big reverb, because it's probably a really slow, smooth jam. And then we're going to have one with loads of chorus and loads of phasing. So again, going to group this into a rack. We open the chains, and the first chain will have the auto filter, and then the second chain will have the hybrid reverb, and the third chain will have the chorus and phaser flanger. So 2 of them at the same time. So obviously now if I play the vocals, it's just going to be loads of effects over, like all of the effects will be in, yeah, just sent to the 3 different chains. So that's not what we want. We're going to work on the 3 of them separated. So chain 1 will be the effect for the first track that I'm performing. So that's going to be track 1. And then the second chain will be track 2. And the third track will be track 3. So first track, let's solo the first chain.
You left and this up. Our end was
This is how I'm singing for the first track. For the second track,
knowing you was breaking me. cutting deep.
This is how I'm singing, loads of reverb. For the third track,
You left and set me free.
loads of chorus.
And was beginning of me.
And loads of phaser flanger. Yeah, it's doable. It's a scenario, 3 different tracks, 3 different processing. But obviously when we perform, we don't really want to be soloing the chains. We don't really want to go and look at the screen and, fiddle with small buttons. What if, the computer's not even on stage because it's down on the rack? So we're going to make this mappable and more accessible. So if we open the macros are something super cool in live because it just allows you to do loads of different things. First of all, if we look back on the bass instrument that I've created, by the end, look how long the chain is. It's just going, going, going. So anytime I'm mixing and I wanted access to the amount of the noise, I would always have to open up the chain, go there all the way to the end of the chain. So that's not really accessible. So instead, we can map the chain, the noise amount to a macro. So that's always at the beginning of the chain. So we can basically map any parameters from across any devices from any of the chains to the macros. So, we got 16 of them, so choose wisely. So we can display more. That's also new. That not used to be 16 of them. So we got the little plus and minus buttons. So first thing first, let's make this accessible. So we're going to map out the frequency of the auto filter. So I'm going to right click and then map to macro 1. And we're going to go to track 2, go to the driver of the reverb, right click, map to macro 2. So now that's on the macro. I'm going to quickly rename this because that's the reverb. And then on track 3, we're going to map driver of the chorus, macro 3, and driver of the phaser, macro 4. So quick renaming, chorus, phaser. So that's all good. Now if I move the chorus, then we see that little green dot at the bottom. So that's moving that parameter on the device. So even if I had a parameter at the back of the chain somewhere far away, I can always move it from the macro. So, but that's not what I really want to show you. Is basically how to flick between these tracks without soloing. So I can go to macro snapshots, to this little camera button, like variations. And then we're going to create a couple new one of them, but first we're going to also set up the chains. So before we head to the variations, we got this other button here, chain. So for instrument tracks, we saw the velocity key chain. For effect tracks, we don't have those because they're not an effect is not an instrument, so we only got a chain selector. So what we're going to do, instead of splitting the chains over semitones, we just going to split this within these areas so we can select between them. So I'm going to pull this out till like 8, it doesn't really matter for this, and then get the second chain, pull it out there, and then the third chain, and pull it out there. And then the chain selector will define which of the chains will be playing back. So if I play the vocals, the chain selector is around the first chain's area. If I move the chain selector, it's on track 2 and track 3. So basically, during performance, one option would be that we just move this chain selector that we map to an encoder, and then we just switch to the effect on our voice without having to have 3 different vocal tracks with 3 different chains of effects on it. It's just all on the same track. With a button, we can flick between them. So let's map this chain selector to another macro so we can forget about that view. And we can just use this guy here now, which will move the chain selector, okay? And one thing we could do is, let me get my camera feedback somehow. Oof. There, okay. So, let me just move a few things around here. So I've got this little Novation launch control, which is, I love it. I think it's discontinued by now, but it's just a bunch of buttons and encoder, what not to like. So we're going to MIDI map this chain selector by hitting Command M, and then I'm going to touch the first encoder, and now we have a little number, which is a CC number, and I can go and close the mapping. And now if I move this here, you will see the chain selector encoder is also moving. So I could just use this to flick between, no, let me move this, to flick between the chains. So that's one way, move it manually. Next way is to capture the chain selector's position into a macro variation. So we're going to move this to the first little value, which is the filter, track 1. So new variation, we're going to hit the little camera button. So now we captured all my macros position. If we don't want the other ones to be captured, we can right click and then do exclude from variation. So we can freely move them still. And that's going to be called track 1. And then we're going to move the chain selector again, create a new variation, capture it, and that's going to be track 2. And then move the chain selector again, new variation, capture it, track 3. So now what I can do is just use these little launch buttons, and you see if I launch this, whoof, the chain selector jumped to the first one. If I use that, whoof, it's jumped to the second, and then the third. And this is also mappable, MIDI mappable, so we can use, we could map up and down button, so it just goes to the next one, or we could map the launch buttons. So we could use this little guy here. I'm just scared to go back to look for this camera now. No? My camera is somewhere busy. But anyway, we could map that to one of the encoders or to the pads, so that would make it jump during your performance. So we wouldn't have to use the screen for that. So this is truly unique to live. There's no other place where we can get this done. And if you kind of start thinking about this whole chains and the macro variations and the captures, you could basically build a guitar pedal. So literally map that to a foot pedal and then just switch it off and on with different chains and play the guitar, which I think is just kind of nuts that you have a software-based guitar pedal that you still externally triggering. So yeah, that's definitely something totally unique and to me totally exciting because it just does a load of stuff. There's also a different way to make this jump from track to other track is using dummy clips. So how we can get that done is creating an audio track. This is going to get a bit nerdy now. As I said, as we go more in there, it's going to happen. So we're going to use this track as a dummy track. So it's not going to play back any audio. We basically just going to use this to have clips on it so we can write automation into the clips, which then will move the chain selector for us. So I'm going to rename this track to dummy. And one important thing, that this has to be input monitored. And we also have to route this. Let me just get myself that. Okay, so it's input monitored, the dummy track. So whatever is going to be on it won't be played back because it's always looking for input. And for that reason, I'm just going to move this clip there. But it's not going to do anything. I will even pull down the gain of it because I don't need that clip. I'm just going to use the envelopes of that clip to move the effects. So the effects also have to be on the dummy track, not on the lead track. And we're going to route the lead track to the dummy track, which now has the effects. So we're going to do audio to dummy. And you see this clip here went obviously grayed out because the track is input monitored. So I'm going to triple this up, and we're going to do first dummy clip will be track 1, second dummy clip will be track 2, and the third dummy clip will be track 3. And now because the track has the rack itself, I'm going to move my chain selector to the track 1 chain, open track 1 clip, we in the envelope, audio effect rack, chain selector, and I'm just going to write this position into down here into automation, to the automation envelope. And then I'm going to go to track 2, move the chain selector to the second track position, and now create a breakpoint, so that's also written. And then go to track 3, move this to track 3's chain, go to the envelope, and also write that into down here into the automation envelope. So now what's going to happen, I'm just going to be triggering these clips, and the clips will automate the device chain selection, so the effect chains will change over the track. So track 1, look there. Going to launch track 2. It's moved to the track 2 chain, and track 3. And we can see the chain selector is automated because it's got the red dot. So yeah, you can have as many as you want from these. So there is actually now 3 different options how you can move that one chain selector, either through mapping the chain selector's macro to a controller, or mapping the macro snapshots to a controller, or writing automation to dummy clip envelopes and launching them during performance. Yeah, so that's definitely also a live exclusive kind of business. And then I've got one more rack to be built. This is probably going to be the nerdiest, because we're going to create a drum rack now with instrument racks inside the drum cells. So again, it would be really good for performance. If you, let's say, you want to change sound of your drums while it's playing. Like obviously if you want to change your drum sounds, usually what you do, you have 2 different drum tracks and drum sounds on the tracks and in the racks. But again, what if you can't arm the track on time? It's just, you know, it's just not kind of the same workflow. So this will be kind of a combination of loads of the stuff that we looked at today to kind of come full circle, because yeah, this is just another kind of exciting thing that we can build. So another MIDI track, and this time we're gonna go and get a drum rack, empty drum rack. And as we know drum racks, what do you do usually? You put a sample in there, and then another sample to the next cell, and then you use your push, and then you sequence there, which is fine. We're gonna do that, but we're gonna have racks within the cells itself. So we will end up with about 6 instrument racks within the same drum rack. So kick drum, I promise you will make sense at the end. So 1 kick, like a really low kick. So I'm gonna put that onto the first cell. And in theory, now I can go and sequence it, yoo-hoo. But let's find my other kick, which is a bit more high-pitched. It's got a bit more transient information as well. So if I drag this down to the drum cell, it will replace the sound. But if I hold down Command, then it will put the 2 kicks into an instrument rack. So now there's an instrument rack on the drum cell. So right now, it's going to trigger both of them in the same time. Yeah, it's 2 kicks in the same time, but that's not what I want. Because I'm going to open up my chain selector, and we will divide these into 2 different positions that we can have with the chain selector. So basically, what I'm going to do, I'm going to build about 2 different kits within the same drum rack. So that's my kick. Now we're going to do that with a clap. And somewhere, I've got that one as well. So 1 clap, hold down Command, 2 clap. We're going to do the same thing, get the chain selector. First clap. And then the second clap. And 1 more, just a hi-hat quickly. One hat, and I have one more somewhere. That one, okay. Okay, first, no, I replaced that. Okay, so 1, go down to cell, and then get the other hat. Hold down Command, there we go. I'm going to do the same thing, chain one of them halfway, and then the other one halfway. Okay, cool. Now all we need to do, I think I missed my second clap. Let me just fix that. There we go. Not sure what happened there. So I'm just going to quickly fix this up. For some reason it just disappeared. Okay, so what we can see is each of the cells have 1 sound on the left and 1 sound on the right, yeah? But somehow we want to go between them in the right time. So the chain selector, again, needs to be mapped to macros. So let's quickly do that for the kick. Right click, macro 1, which is inside that rack, which is inside the drum rack. So you see we didn't get to the main macro, but we can map an internal macro to the main macro. So we mapped the chain selector to the drum rack's macro, and now we're going to map the drum rack's macro to the main macro, yeah, on the left side. So there we go. That guy mapped to there, and that is mapped to there, okay? Second one, same business. Map to macro 1, and map that to the main macro. map to macro 1, and map that to the main macro. Okay, we got there. So let's quickly sequence something in so I can show you how this is going to work. So I've got a scene here somewhere, there we go, where I wrote in a tempo change. So this scene will be in 128. So I'm just going to quickly sequence these sounds in. Okay. That's there. Okay, so we got this, which is one of the kits. So now what we need to get to those change selectors while we're playing back, so we can change between the sounds. So I've got options that I can either map this to somewhere else, or I'm just going to use my push to control the change selections. So if you look, all the change selections first are moving. There we go. So where does this leave you is that you can have one sequence and you could put so many more positions of the change selector, and you could have about 10 kits within the same rack. So your drum sequence just keeps on playing, but it's always maybe a different sound for the second snare. There's always a different sound for the first kick. It's always a different sound for the triplet of the hats. Do you know what I mean? And again, it's more for performance, because why would you want to do this for production? You wouldn't. But also, these quick changes, it's impossible without building something like this. So it will just, again, allow you to create a really expressive and interesting performance using small amount of tracks, but of course, loads of technical knowledge. But once you make this, then obviously it will just work always, and you can just replace the sounds, because you see it takes a bit of time to set up the change selections, and obviously it'd be nice to go in and mix each of the sounds within the instrument racks, which are living inside the drum racks. But this is another kind of interesting way of how we can use racks, because I think it's also not very known that you can have more different stuff in a drum rack than samples, or you can have multiple sounds without having a multi-cell inside the drum rack. So yeah, basically it's just something to think about. And with that, I think I arrived to the end of my rack adventures. So I'm happy to take some questions if there were any, or if not, that I would just think that I explained everything very well, which is obviously I don't think the case. So do fire some questions if there are any online or in the room.
There was some questions online, but they've been answered by you already. So if you have questions here, please go ahead. And if you're watching online, please do post questions and we'll aim to answer.
Come on, guys, don't do what you do in classes, yeah?
So can we have a big applause for Anna?
Yeah, no questions?
No questions? I have a question. Tim Griffith. has a question about arrangement. What tips have you got for getting out of the 8-bar loop for production?
Okay, I think that's such a common problem. Let me just go and find this arrangement that I had here. I think the easiest way is to kind of create an A and a B section. So if we have an 8-bar loop, which is usually the most busy, like the busiest 8-bar loop, is usually you stop at the 8-bar loop and there's no more space to put something else in there. So that means you have theoretically loads of elements there. So there's two ways where you could go, is basically start kind of taking away, so duplicating the 8-bar and then trialing out, okay, what if in the second 8-bar I take away the piano? And then you might actually realize, oh, that's a nice section, it's really chill, and then you can duplicate it again, take something away again, and then be like, maybe that's the time when you feel like it's too empty now, but it might strike an idea, how about if I put a pad in there? How about if I put something else in there? So basically that would be advice number 1, is to duplicate the same 8-bar section 2-3 times and take some elements away and see what they sound like and if it helps you to develop. Or the second advice would be is just to focus on having a section A, which is your 8-bar loop, and then having a section B where you use some, again, duplicate, and then try to maybe replace some elements of it, change up the melody, change up the riff, so it goes from one part to a second part, and that will most of the time create an idea of, okay, now I need to make this transition somehow. So then you already start working on the transition and you realize I'm out of my 8 bars. So yeah, that would be my advice from getting out of that.
Thank you, Anna. I'm still waiting to see if there's any more questions coming in. But
I shall drink some then.
There, Tim was happy with that answer, I believe.
Cool, Tim.
All good from everybody? Okay, well, let's thank Anna again. And thank you, everybody,